Find the Juice is back, and today we're breaking down my top 3 favorite running backs. Some you can take in redraft leagues, and all 3 you can take in dynasty and keeper leagues, and they will pay off. But first, I'm going to start with the one guy that everyone is talking about for the last year that I completely disagree with, and that's Boise State running back, new Las Vegas Raider, Ashton Jeanty. A lot of you might not know because you don't pay attention as much to college football as I do, looking at you other fantasy football experts. Jeanty only had 5 games all season, including the postseason, against teams who were not ranked 100 or worse against the run in 2024. In those 5 games, he had 792 yards, 8 touchdowns for 5.2 yards per carry. So to create a projection for what he should do in the NFL, I took his, along with all other college players who are now rookies, I took their college stats against average or above average defense in college for last season, found out the fantasy points per rush and or per target depending on the position, and then took off the average decline that player will see going from college to the NFL. And for Jeanty, that gave me a 0.61 fantasy points per rush. Now, is that good? Is that bad? Well, let me tell you, and ask yourself, if you would draft these guys in the first round, whether you're the Raiders in the NFL with the 6th pick or in your fantasy league with a top 12, 10, or 8 pick, that 0.61 is comparable to Chuba Hubbard, DeAndre Swift, Miles Sanders, Kareem Hunt, Ramondre Stevenson, and Tony Pollard in 2024. Just the rushing, not the receiving. Now, would you take any of those guys in the first round of any fantasy draft? Keeper, dynasty, redraft? You tell me. Now, part of the hype for Jeanty now in the NFL is the fact that the Raiders signed Chip Kelly as offensive coordinator and Pete Carroll as the head coach. Everyone's assuming that this will now mean the Raiders will become a run-heavy offense. But the thing about running the ball is what? Most teams that are winning run the ball. Because when you run the ball, the clock doesn't stop. So when you're losing, you need to stop the clock because when the clock is running, you have less time to try to mount a comeback. So to piggyback off this, I will let you know the Raiders are projected to have 5.5 wins this season by FanDuel, which does not really sit well with them becoming the run-heavy team that's being reported. Now, to add to what other experts are saying is Jeanty's receiving game. Well, that's also a concern for me with Jeanty, as he is only able to catch 66% of his targets last season. This is even more of a concern with me for Jeanty because all those passes were very short yardage, either in the backfield or on very short out route. And just to show you more evidence that the Raiders are probably not gonna be a run heavy team, Pete Carroll's worst season in Seattle was in 2010 when they went 7-10. That team ran the ball on only 38% of total plays. That ranked 27th in the NFL. So you're telling me the Raiders, who are projected for 2 less wins, are supposed to be a run-heavy team when Pete Carroll's worst team didn't even run the ball 40% of the time? And just to keep piling on Ashton Jeanty, this man has had a fumbling problem dating all the way back to high school. He doesn't lower his pads when he's running between the tackles, which Chip Kelly has already been getting on to him about since rookie camp. He does have great cutbacks and jukes, but it's hard to truly evaluate his running ability and how it will translate to the NFL, facing such horrendous defenses all season to go along with the lack of a real pro running style. Anybody telling you he will be a top back this year is basing that purely on his stats against all of those bottom 34 run defenses in all of college football, running through 5-yard wide holes and through very weak arm tackles. So if you doubt me, if I'm right, I want you to come back and apologize. After that bashing, now let's get into the good news. My top 3 rookie running backs. Number 3, right now, Omarion Hampton on the Los Angeles Chargers. The Chargers were 10th last year in rushing play percentage, which is great news for Omarion Hampton. And Craig Roman, the offensive coordinator for the Chargers, loves running the ball. Now, the Chargers also signed Najee Harris in the offseason from the Pittsburgh Steelers. But Najee Harris is missing training camp due to a 4th of July firework mishap which has put him far behind in strength and conditioning, learning the offense on this brand new team, and putting him back from creating team chemistry on the field, opening the door even more for Omarion Hampton to step into the lead back role on day one of the season. Omarion Hampton is more of a gamble compared to the other two guys coming up on this list, as he played in a weak ACC conference in college and only facing 5 college teams with above average run defense that we can scout from, just like Ashton Jeanty. Against those 5 teams, he put up 668 yards, 7 touchdowns, and 5.5 yards per carry. This would project to a .65 fantasy points per rush. Now that is comparable to James Conner, Bijan Robinson, Josh Jacobs, Joe Mixon, Ken Walker, all in rushing for 2024. Omarion Hampton caught 80% of his targets at North Carolina in 2024, but with a negative 2.2 average depth of target, which tells me that he primarily ran short yardage routes, but even more so was getting passes on screenplays and dump offs. The Chargers offensive coordinator loves to run a gap scheme run offense, which should fit perfectly with Omarion Hampton. He has great vision, great patience behind the offensive line, and he runs really hard behind his pads. I think this sets up well for Omarion Hampton to have a fantastic rookie season in LA. Are you ready for number 2? It's Iowa's and now Pittsburgh Steelers Caleb Johnson. Caleb Johnson has 757 yards, 13 touchdowns, and 4.8 yards per carry against average or better rushing defense last year. That would give him, in my projections, a .7 fantasy points per rush, and that is comparable to, get ready for this, Derrick Henry, James Cook, David Montgomery, and Kyren Williams in rushing last year. He's heading into an even better situation than Omarion Hampton was, as the Steelers were 5th in the NFL in rushing play percentage. They ran the ball 48% of the total plays they called. Caleb Johnson is also a good pass catcher, albeit on a lot of short route screens, etc., catching 81% of his targets last year. This will help him cut independent free agent Jaylen Warren's role in Pittsburgh and shows Caleb Johnson can be a 3-down back. Johnson has good vision, good patience, and toughness with his big muscular frame at 6 foot 225 pounds. Put that in perspective, Derrick Henry was 6'3", 243 coming out of college. He's explosive when hitting the hole between the tackles and can juke while also running behind his pads to truck linebackers due to his size and strength. And if you're looking for a rookie running back to get in your redraft for this year, Caleb Johnson is my favorite just because of how much volume he should get in Pittsburgh and his catching ability and how big and strong he is. And I think he could somewhat emulate Derrick Henry. And finally, we'll get into my number 1 favorite rookie running back this season. It's going to be Ohio State running back, national champion, Trevion Henderson. I loved him last year when he was supposed to come out, and I love him again this year. He was the lead back for the national champion Ohio State Buckeyes. He faced 12, so we have a great scouting report on this guy. 12 above average run defenses in 2024. 4 of them were top 10 in run defenses, with Texas at 12th in all of college football. In those 12 games, Trevion Henderson has 724 yards, 5 touchdowns with 6.4 yards per carry. These translate into a .65 fantasy points per rush, which is comparable to the same guys as Omarion Hampton. He caught 79% of his targets last season. He thrived in screens and touchdown passes, but he only had 2 targets all year that went beyond 10 yards. That doesn't mean that he can't do that as well, as it was not needed last season, as Ohio State's receiving room was loaded. So Ohio State didn't really need to rely on Trevion Henderson's pass catching ability. The thing that separates Henderson from Caleb Johnson and Omarion Hampton is his explosiveness with great breakaway speed and a great change of direction, which makes a lot of defenders miss in the open field. My only piece of advice with Trevion is if you want to take him this year, go ahead and grab Ramondre Stevenson, as he's still being used as a lead back in training camp right now. Also, it's good protection because Trevion Henderson does have an injury history in college, which actually held him from declaring for the NFL draft last year. Henderson does have the potential, though, to somewhat become this year's Devon Achane, a stash on the bench guy who takes over mid-season and can carry you to a fantasy championship. And I just thought it would be right if I left you guys with 4 guys you can stash on your bench who I think by the end of the year, or if you're in Dynasty or Keeper next year, are going to be very impactful, but won't be so at the start of the season. First, RJ Harvey. Everyone loves RJ Harvey. It's the only guy I hear about besides Ashton Jeanty, but the Broncos did spend money to get J.K. Dobbins to go along with R.J. Harvey. The thing that gets me excited for R.J. Harvey is his measurables and his projected fantasy points per rush and combine results all compare pretty much equally with Jahmyr Gibbs. But like I said, you're going to have to wait for him to take that role over from J.K. Dobbins, either due to injury or severe out production. My next guy on this list is Ja'Cory Krosky-Merritt. He fell very far in this draft because of his ineligibility issues in college last year. He's a slippery runner with explosive feet and big playability from making defenders miss tackles. He's shown out in training camp, getting praise from players, coaches, and media, and he could take over this backfield easily with one Brian Robinson injury. And next, we got a New Orleans Saint, rookie Devin Neal out of Kansas. He actually comps extremely well to Alvin Kamara in size and combine results. He's a very patient runner, not a big play guy, but excels in both the run and the pass game. He is more of a dynasty or keeper league pickup, as you're going to have to wait for Kamara to be hurt or move on from the Saints. And finally, my favorite sleeper, because I play Dynasty now, is Kyle Monangai. The Bears didn't use a lot of draft capital to get Monangai, as he was selected in the 7th round, but this could be Ben Johnson's Knuckles. If you remember back in Detroit, Sonic and Knuckles, Jahmyr Gibbs, and David Montgomery. Monangai is very comparable actually to David Montgomery with his size and his play style. Chicago media is already mentioning Montgomery when they're talking about Monangai. This is a stash and an even better pickup in Dynasty if you are on Sleeper and has some taxi squad spots open, as we're going to have to wait for him to take Roschon Johnson's role. But Roschon Johnson's still on his rookie deal, so if he's still on the team this offseason, it's no problem to cut him and let Monangai take that spot. So keep your eye open for him, especially if you're in a Dynasty or a Keeper league. And that'll be it. We will be hitting you back with some real fantasy football projections, not just the rookies. That's coming up. Oh, and look out for our San Jose Sharks NHL video, baby. Peace.